one drink was too little, and too many drinks are never enough. So we will be back in a couple of weeks, where Munya is going to unpack for us the 12th step therapy that he went through.
So we're here to discuss 12-step addiction therapy. The first thing that had to happen, and the first thing that has to happen, is that you have to be able to admit powerlessness. And you have to be in a position where you realize that this thing that you have is so much bigger than you, and it's got a power over you, it's got a hold over you. We spoke a little bit earlier about the allergy of alcoholism, where it affects your body, and in the same way that an allergy affects you, but it's also mental and a spiritual and a physical affliction. But it's mainly about the power that this thing has over you. You're not able to stop drinking. So that's step one. Step one is to admit that you're powerless over this thing. Once you've admitted that you're powerless over something, now you've got a problem. You don't have the power that you need to conquer this thing. And that brings us neatly to the second step, that you now have to find a power that's greater than you, that can help you overcome this thing. And in the program that helped us, they mention the God of your understanding, and a power greater than you, or your higher power, some people like to call it. And that can be anything. I remember there was this one time we heard a share where this guy was told in rehab that your higher power can be your pillow. And the guy was like, what do you mean? So, well, if you believe that your pillow can help you with your addiction to alcohol, that's all you need for the steps. So once you've found this power that's greater than you, this higher power that controls you and that can help you with your addiction with alcoholism, now you have to be able to surrender to it. Because clearly when you were in control and when you were in charge of the things that you were doing, you couldn't control your addiction. You couldn't control the alcoholism. For me, when I relied on myself, if it was up to me, I would be drunk all the time. If it was up to me, that's how I would solve all my problems. I wouldn't have a family, I wouldn't have a home if it was up to me. So which is why you now have to find that power and then be able to surrender to it, which brings us to the next place. And it's a decision, which is why it's so important that this power that you surrender to is a power that you understand. I remember I was asked, what does God look like to you? And that was a very interesting question. They said to me, write down what God looks like to you, what that power greater than you is like. And I remember writing down, on my cloud, so, and he's got a long beard and gray hair, and then I realized that it's not that, but God was everything. He was everywhere to me. It wasn't a thing or a being. He was in everything. Once you've decided that you've been able to hand over your power to something more powerful than you and more powerful than your addiction, remember that? It has to be more powerful than your addiction. Then you have to search yourself, all right? And then you have to search within yourself, and you have to come up with a list of all the things that you've done wrong and all the things that bother you. And this is usually the hardest step, because no one wants to look into themselves and admit, you know what I mean? I messed up. But a great thing happens is once you're able to go through that and you write everything down, you start to understand yourself better, and you start to understand what it is that led you to the point of drinking uncontrollably or having this addiction that had power over you. And the key to this whole 12-step process is humility. There's three things, humility being one of the main ones. There's three things: honesty, openness, and willingness. We call it how, but all of those are fueled by humility. So the next step is about being able to share that with people. And a great thing happens when you're able to look at all the things that you've done and share them with the God as you understand them, and another person next to you, is that it gets taken away. That's it, it's gone, But it takes humility to be able to do that. And it also gives you accountability. So now you know that you're not just, accountable to yourself, you're accountable to God or a power greater than yourself and to another human being. And what that does is it helps integrate you back into society, because now you're accountable to the people around you. You're humble enough to admit that, okay, this is where I was wrong. But obviously you don't do it with everyone. You do it to God and to another human being. So usually what happens with these steps is that you have somebody that walks you through them. Step 6, you're just willing. You haven't even asked them to remove them yet. You're just willing. So you've written them down. You said, no, this is who I am. This is where I've made my mistakes. And then you move on to the next step where you're humbly asking him to remove your shortcomings. So remember, we've listed them, we've spoken about them, and then we've become willing to get rid of them. Now we're asking God to remove them. Remember, we spoke about all the debris and all the wreckage that we had left in our past, all the things that we had done wrong, all the things that were done wrong to us. And there's this whole list. Now we have to write them down, the people and institutions and places and things. We write them down, right? We write them on a list and become willing to make an amends. Now, an amends is a difficult one. Amends, people think amends is just saying sorry. It's not saying sorry. An amends is, you're not apologizing. You're saying, I've acknowledged what I did wrong and I can't change it because it's already happened and it happened in the past. But I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to making sure that I do better than I did then. That's an amends. So you write down a list of all the people that you'd harmed, all institutions that you'd harmed, and became willing to make an amends to them. Just be willing. This one is probably the hardest one. You have to actually make direct amends to these people, except when to do so would injure them or others. So it's a very fine line. I mean, there's some amends that if you make them, a lot of people will be in pain. I had owed someone some money and there were some transactions that were less than savory. And I knew that by mentioning it, I would get other people in trouble. But I had to become willing to make amends for that. And what that does is it puts you in a position where you're prepared to make the amends. And that's good enough. Life is a journey. It's an ongoing process. It doesn't stop now that you're sober and now that you've found your sobriety and you've stopped drinking or you've stopped whatever it was that you're addicted to and you've managed to get to this point. You have to constantly keep making amends as you go along. You have to constantly keep checking yourself because it's a journey. No one is perfect. And the funny thing happens when you go through the steps. You get rid of all these terrible things about yourself, but they don't go away. They keep coming back. And you find yourself in similar situations where this thing has come back to you and you have to be able to deal with it. When someone told me about meditation, I thought that I had to sit there and it felt like something crazy, but meditation is just being able to pause and talk to God or talk to your higher power. And what that does is that it gives you a moment. I remember I used to be I still am a keyboard warrior. Somebody says something to me, I respond, ipap. Or somebody says something to me, I respond. I'm quick, And my tongue is fire, And I'd always find that I'd say things that I'd later regret because I wasn't able to pause, So I realized that what has to happen is that your whole way of being has to change. So you have to constantly seek through conscious contact with your higher power. And you do that through prayer and meditation. And there's methods that we use according to these 12 steps where you hand over your day right at the beginning of the day. And any moment that you find that you're overwhelmed, you hand it over. Because remember, this is a threefold disease. It affects your mind, your body, and your spirit. And if your mind is unsettled, it unsettles your spirit and your soul. And if your mind and your spirit are unsettled, your body becomes unsettled. And that's how you then lash out. A spiritual awakening, it sounds like, just like meditation. What does that even mean? Does it mean that I have to be like Saul and be thrown from my horse? Please don't quote me on that. Thrown from my horse and struck by lightning or, no, it doesn't mean that. The definition of a spiritual awakening that makes sense to me is a paradigm shift, a change in mind and being and ways of interacting with the world. That's what a spiritual awakening is. And when you get to that, and some people get to it slowly, some people get to it fast, but you get there eventually. And when it happens, And I remember, when after I'd stopped drinking I'd stopped drinking for 2 years, and then I found the 12 steps. I count from when I found the 12 steps. So I've been sober for 3.5 years, right? And people always told me that I changed. And you could see the difference, like my energy had changed, the way I interacted with people. I wasn't so tense, and I wasn't so aggravated and so uncomfortable, So having had that spiritual awakening, you have to share these principles with other people. And that's very important, because this program, this 12-step program was given to me for free, and it saved my life, and it keeps me sober. So what happens is when I share it with other people, I remember there's 3 pillars. One of them is unity, service, and recovery. Well, those are the 3 pillars that keep me together. And service means going out to do things for complete strangers and just going out to help people. Every time I speak to another alcoholic, it keeps me sober, because it's a reminder of where I was and where I don't want to be again. But not only that, it also makes me feel good. Like, when you do things that are good, your soul feels good. So it feeds you as well. And it's also, the more you speak about the 12-step program, the more you're practicing it. It's a weird thing. And it's all about changing the way you are as a human being and the way you process the world. Remember I said that as an addict, I've got a mind that cannot process reality, and then a body that cannot process alcohol. And together, those are a very dangerous combination. And the whole point of this 12-step program is to fix those things. I'll never change, but I can learn how to manage who I am in reality and in life, so that I don't upset the balance and I don't force myself to create conditions that make me want to have another drink. Anything in excess is bad. So this 12-step program taught me balance and taught me the middle ground. Thank you, and I hope that the 12 steps work for you. And if you need any help with the 12 steps, please reach out to Vitality Wellness, and we can definitely help you out. There's also 20 questions that I'm going to add at the end of the video, and you can just ask yourself these questions. And if you answer yes to at least 10 of the questions, you might be an alcoholic, or you might be an addict. And if you are, please reach out to us. Thank you for listening and watching.
This program is brought to you by Zimplats in partnership with Vitality Wellness, First Link and Soulmate.